Hi, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Tech Talk in our series, all about the Greenery S. My name is Rebecca. I'm really excited to be here with you today talking about maximizing space with vertical farming. So joining me today in this conversation is the amazing Lexi Basquette. She's our farm manager here at Freight Farms. And I'm sure you're all familiar with her. She's done a bunch of our farm tours in the past, and I could think of no other better person to help walk us through just how we use space in the greenery. Lexi, I'll let you say hi. There you are. Hey.
There we go. Hey there, everybody. Nice to be joining y'all today. Like Rebecca said, my name is Lexi Basquette. I'm our farm manager here, and I'm very excited to be joining to provide my input of what it's like to actually be a farm operator in a Greenery S.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff today. It's all going to be recorded, so feel free to just follow along. And then at the end, we'll be doing our live Q&A. So as with always, please submit your questions at the bottom in our Q&A feature. So let's get right to it. To start, I just wanted to talk about a little bit about our mission here at Freight Farms, which is really to help anyone grow food anywhere. And a really big piece of that anywhere, piece of our mission is the shipping container itself. So to start us off, Lexi, do you mind just talking a little bit about why we choose to use a shipping container as the vessel for our farms?
Absolutely. So Freight Farms was actually the first to come up with the idea of putting hydroponic growing technology inside of a shipping container. Our founders saw the need to make more local food options more accessible, but didn't really see a good standardized way to make it available to a wide range of applications and a wide range of environments as well. We were definitely inspired by how containers would be being used in a lot of really creative spaces like retail environments, also residential environments as well. And we definitely recognize that the installation capacity of a shipping container would be a perfect shell for controlled environment agriculture. Additionally, containers are super easy to transport around the world, as we know, through already established shipping routes. And the shell of our farms, which is actually a custom built shell, it's not actually a repurposed shipping container. They are they follow their extremely resilient design of traditional containers, and it has the insulation range to keep crops growing in their ideal environment, even if the external environment is as cold as, let's say, Sweden or northern Canada, Alaska, or as warm as tropical island nations, Middle East, or honestly, a lot of the United States right now. And another cool element to this type of growing as it relates to maximizing space is you actually need a very low infrastructure requirement. So you just need 50 square feet of space to actually place the container on. You need access to water, and you need access to electricity and Wi-Fi. So this sort of spatial modular component makes it actually very easy to change locations should that ever be necessary. It's not sort of the same as buying a plot of land or putting the money into building a greenhouse. You're actually able to pick up the container and move it, which is sort of something that's super unique to our model versus other models.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So now that we have a good sense of kind of the exterior and the shell and how we're maximizing, usable space and maybe places that you wouldn't normally be able to put a regular farm, let's actually step into the container. And you spend a lot of time in the greenery. You are probably the most familiar with how this space works. So why don't you just walk us through a bit of the layout and what you would see if you were to step into the farm?
Totally. So as you walk into the front door, you're going to see the main area, the cultivation area, which is going to be the back, about 2/3 of the farm. And you will also see that the nursery station is going to be the first thing on your immediate left when you walk in. So those are our two specialized growing areas. They're specialized for different parts of the plant's life cycle. So the nursery station is going to be where your plants start out their life. As you can see from this photo here, we have lots of beautiful seedlings growing in there. It's got two different troughs that use an ebb and flow style hydroponic, which is a little bit different from our cultivation area, which is where our the main growing area of our farm, which is where all of your mature plants will grow. And this is going to use sort of an overhead drip irrigation style hydroponic system. We won't go too much into that today because actually our next tech talk after this one will be all about hydroponics and water. So if you're interested in that, that's definitely going to really be a cool one. So you can learn more about that in that next one. But the reason that we separate them out a little bit as well is because the vertical style is actually what really, really maximizes that space. Although we want to give our seedlings a nice, healthy start, we want to give them a nice sort of undisturbed, not anti-gravity sort of space. It helps them maximize their root development, maximizes their stem development to help them grow nice and big when they mature.
Amazing. And I think on that note, let's look a little bit closer at that nursery station and what exactly happens in those 2 horizontal trails.
Absolutely. So we have a total capacity for about 4,608 plants, and that is due to the structure of our table. So we have spaces for 16 seedling trays. We have those 2 troughs. We've got 8 spaces on each, and each seedling tray that we have in our table is going to hold 288 seedlings. So in total, that's about 4,600 plants. So that is definitely maximizing your space in that not only is it sort of stacked on top of each other, doubling your kind of growing capacity, but these 288 cell trays really maximize every inch of space because it's sort of the exact amount of space that your seedlings will require as they get to that mature stage when they're actually ready to be taken from the seedling table and out transplanted into the main area. You'll probably not be using your entire seedling table all at one time. You're not necessarily going to be planting the entire thing at once. It sort of is acting as your kind of supply for your cultivation area because you will be working on a schedule of seeding 1 week, seeding again another week, and then transplanting a few weeks later because plants usually spend about 3 weeks in this space. So you want to have sort of a rolling stock so that you can maintain a consistent schedule so you can have those consistent weekly harvests for whoever your customer is going to be.
Amazing. So taking a bit of a step back, the nursery station does serve this dual purpose within the farm. And I think it's really interesting when you talk about, I'm excited for you to explain kind of how we've thought through the design of the actual workstation area to also maximize space, but instead of for the plants, for the actual farmers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that worktop looks like?
Definitely. So like Rebecca just mentioned, this is going to be the main workstation in your farm. This is going to be where you're doing all of your tasks in the farm, such as seeding, transplanting, and harvesting. So you're going to be spending a lot of time in this space. So we have added some additional features to our new Greenery S table to allow a farmer to kind of get the most out of their experience as they are operating this table, making things a little bit easier to do all of the different tasks that they will be doing there. Awesome. So this is a look at our brand new table, and we're going to walk through some of each of these cool new features that we have integrated into the design now. So this first one you're definitely going to notice is going to be the new tabletop riser. So this kind of portions out different elements of the workstation so you can kind of keep things a little bit more separate and a little bit more organized. I can definitely see this being very useful when you're transplanting specifically. Because you can see that there's sort of different separate mats out up on the top, and you can actually see one of the trays up there as well. When you put your trays up on there, they will be a little bit moist on the bottom. They're going to leave a little bit of water behind. Certainly when you're actually taking those plugs out to then get ready to transplant, those will be moist as well. And so, having water on the table isn't necessarily awesome if you are using your laptop to keep data or using a notebook to keep data as well. But these different little mats allow for you to sort of keep wet and dry spaces to make sure that some of your field notes get a little bit damp in the process. So definitely going to be helpful for that process. Additionally, we have a new versatile tool belt that is built into the front face of the table. So this is going to be an area to store kind of any high use tools that you might be using, as well as personal items, maybe the keys to the farm and the lock to the farm as well. I think that's a great spot for that because I also lose that on my table sometimes. But certainly I look forward to being able to put my scissors and tweezers in here. So those are my 2 most frequently used tools. And if anyone tuned into, I don't know if it was the most recent farm tour, but maybe the farm tour right before that, if anyone saw my big panel of mint, that was absolutely big and beautiful and massive. And I put it on the table and I could not see anything else on the table. I lost all of my supplies underneath it and I had to dig through a little bit. So this tool belt will be very helpful for preventing things like that in the future.
Yeah, sure.
And then, And then last but certainly not least, I think this is maybe everyone's most favorite feature that's coming out right now. That's going to be our new built-in sound system. I can tell you from personal experience, being in the office when they have been prototyping this, that the speaker is awesome. Certainly going to be able to make the most out of it while you're at the table, but you can be anywhere in the farm and hear exactly what you want to listen to. I spend usually 6 to 8 hours a day in the farm, usually over a period of 20 to 25 hours a week. So definitely a great time to stream podcasts, listen to music. You know, you got your lights going on in there, so you can definitely make it a fun work environment for yourself.
Yeah, throw a little work party between your farm tasks. Awesome.
Oh yeah. Awesome. And we actually have another feature as well. This is going to be both really interesting to just visually, but also super helpful as well, which is going to be our multifunction LED bar. So this is going to serve a couple different purposes. The most important one is that it is going to act as a plant spacing guide. So you can see from this little moving image right here that it sort of breaks up these little dots along the length of that LED bar. That's so when you put your panel on the table, you can customize the distance of your plant spacing guide to tell you exactly, you know, what 10 plants per panel looks like, or what 15 plants per panel looks like. I know this is going to be super helpful because every time I'm planting, I'm kind of eyeballing it. I'll kind of readjust just to make sure everything's equidistant. That definitely takes a whole lot of time. So to have it be exactly precise, just like this, is going to be a huge time saver and a huge labor saver as well. So that's going to be really exciting. In addition to that, it has an illumination function, which is going to be the white light that you see in this sort of lighting feature. That's going to be extremely helpful for when you're seeding seeds that are kind of on the darker side. So things like kale seeds, basil seeds, mint seeds, definitely. All of those are about the same color as the plugs that we use. So when you're seeding, it's pretty difficult to see if you actually got a seed in there sometimes. We don't want any farmers missing, you know, any plugs or missing whole rows of plugs, which I've definitely done sometimes. You know, that makes it a little tricky. So it's good to have an extra light just to be able to make sure that you're staying on track. And then last but not least, we also have a timer function that's going to be super helpful for our new version of calibration. But I believe it's also available to farmers to use for any sort of personal timer you might want to use. I always like to turn a timer on before I harvest to just let my plants get an extra 5 to 10 minutes of water before I take them out of the panels. So that would, I can imagine that being very useful for that sort of purpose as well.
Definitely. And speaking of watering, I think that's a perfect transition to our tanks and the new design there.
Absolutely. So we talked about sort of all of the visual components, what you're sort of looking at upon immediately seeing the table, but we've also got some hidden features in the table as well, which is now we have included sort of all of the plumbing as it relates to the seedling / nursery table into the table itself, which is going to be that front tank that's going to be on the left-hand side of the table when you walk in, so like right by the front door. And then additionally, we also have all of the dosers for the farm. So both the cultivation area and the nursery station built into the right side of the nursery station table. So these two together are what allow our different parts of the farm to have the water and nutrients they need to have all the plants. But this sort of vertical design is new to our greeneries, and I think this is really great because not only is it taking up sort of less space to allow for, you know, more maximum space for the plants themselves, but also this sort of vertical arrangement of volume makes it so that if your tanks are running slightly low, it's able to kind of preserve those pumps that have to be submerged in water, so that you are able to like continue to operate your farm even with a slower volume of water than you would have been able to previously, giving you more time to come in and fill it up because farmhand is going to let you know that it's time to do so.
Thank you. That was an awesome explanation. And I love it when people that, you know, work with the design or the farming explain these things to other team members, because I know I always learn something new about the intention, and I'm just always so in awe. So we talked about the nursery station, the workstation, and kind of followed the life of the plant. You know, you start in the nursery station for about 3 weeks, you briefly visit the worktop when you're transplanted, and then the plant goes to towards the cultivation area. So can you tell us a little bit about the arrangement of the cultivation area and why we're able to maximize space so well there?
Absolutely. So our cultivation area is made up of 4 rows, and each of these rows contain 22 plant panels, which we'll definitely talk a whole lot about a little bit later, because these plant panels are definitely the main thing that allow us to get the most growing space out of our total amount of space. So our cultivation area is a total of 220 square feet. Like I said, this is going to be sort of the main section of your farm. And within this 220 square feet, you have your 88 panels. Each of them are about 7 feet tall by about a foot wide. So even though these panels are in total taking up 220 square feet, if you laid all of those panels out, you would see about 3,600 or so linear space of growing. So definitely really packing as much in there as possible. So let's dive into actually how these panels are able to maximize this space. So you can see our dimensions over here, and you can see that these panels are broken into 5 growing channels. So this really is the secret to how we're able to maximize all of this growth through various research and development of what crops grow best and what planting style and what sort of the maximum number of plants you can grow in a panel and how long you can grow them for. We've definitely been trying to develop the most ideal growing schedule for our farmers to make sure they can get the most yield out of the space that we're providing to y'all. So like I mentioned, there's a couple different growing strategies for different types of plants. Prefer certain different ones based on sort of the shapes that they are. And you can see from the slide that the 3 types of planting styles we have are row planting, linear planting, and intercropping. So we'll start with row planting. So this is going to be something that is going to be best for lettuces, as you can see in this image, and also mature leafy greens, such as kale and collards, but also things like mizuna, which is that beautiful purple plant in that image just before this one, and also Swiss chard as well. I would also say bok choy falls into this category, definitely. And row planting is just utilizing channels 1, 3, and 5, as you can see from this image. And that's because these plants are going to grow very 3-dimensionally. A lettuce head is going to want to grow in a very 360-degree sort of shape. So we want to make sure that it's able to do so and give it sort of that area to breathe around the sides. Because of this planting structure, you will most likely be able to plant about 10 to 15 plants per channel. And again, you're using 3 channels of your panel. So if we max that out for an entire farm of this planting strategy, that will allow you about 2,600 to 3,900 plants for your entire farm if you were to use this strategy as well. Up next, we have what is known as linear planting. So you can see from the green image on the side, that's going to be all 5 channels in this example. And things that fall into this category are going to be definitely root vegetables, because again, those are spending kind of their energy growing downwards, not as much energy growing upwards. And then additionally, smaller leafy greens that you would trim on a pretty frequent basis. So arugula, mustard greens are good examples of that. And then lastly, pretty much all herbs are going to be happy with this planting structure. So definitely smaller things like oregano and thyme are going to do very well like this. But also I've seen some larger things like basil, parsley, and dill do very well with this planting strategy. So with this planting strategy, you would plant about 15 to 20 plants per channel. And again, you're using all 5. So if we max that for an entire farm, that's going to give us 6,600 to 8,800 plants in your entire farm if you were to use this planting strategy. And that brings us to our last one, which is intercropping. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two. It's going to be essentially if you took a plant that you would traditionally plant in a row planting style, such as a lettuce, and you added something really small in between those two. So you're utilizing all 5 channels, but sort of focusing the larger plants on the 1, 3, 5 and the smaller plants on the 2 and the 4. So most commonly farmers tend to do this with lettuces in 1, 3, 5 and radishes in sort of 2 and 4. I like to suggest this because radishes actually grow super quick in our greeneries. I've seen them get as big as apples in the like 6 weeks, but a more realistic radish size in about 3 weeks. So that's one of our fastest maturing crops. So I like to recommend that to farmers as their intercropping crops, but you could also do sort of tall, skinny herbs in this photo. You can see some thyme in there. I think oregano does pretty well as well in there. So those are some good examples for intercropping. And again, this is a way to really maximize the amount that you're able to grow in the farm in total. All right. So we talked about how we have 4 rows in the farm. So this is sort of an understanding of what operating those rows sort of looks like. So we have 2 main grow racks that have plant panels on them and 1 grow rack that's in the center. All of those have these hand wheels on here that you can see our farmer operating. Super easy to slide them back and forth with minimal effort. And this allows the farmer to customize the spacing of their farm to make sure it can transition easily from a sort of workable workspace where you're able to move in and out the area to whatever customized lighting arrangement that you need your plants to have when it's time for the lights to turn on. Awesome. So this is another example of how we're able to utilize sort of maximize space in our farm, is how we're actually planting our plants and then setting our lights sort of overnight, or our overnight, but the plant's daytime. So the most common one is going to be this first example A right here. So this is all equidistant spacing. So each of our panels are in the home position, which means they're about 18 inches from the LEDs. So the exterior panels, interior panels, all of them are equidistant from the lights. But let's say we're growing some things that are a little bit taller. We have 1 row of plants that are much taller than our other plants. Maybe they're mature kale, mature collards. They need a little bit more room than maybe our lettuces and our herbs. So if we were to choose that, we could pick any of these different sort of arrangement styles to have our taller plants have a little bit more space away from the light than our shorter plants. So this is to ensure that they're all being lit equally, but it allows some of our taller plants to be able to mature to the size that we want them to be to maximize our yield. And if we wanted to have, let's say, 2 rows of taller plants, we could go with this option as well in the center, which gives us 2 rows that are further from the light and 2 rows that are closer to the light. Again, customizing and maximizing the space that we have.
That was amazing. So much information and so little time. Like your knowledge of the farm just shines through. So thank you for walking us through that. I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions in the Q&A to dive into maybe some more details, but that was a fantastic overview. Super quick. As many of you know, aside from the Greenery S, we also have a fully integrated software platform called Farmhand that works in tandem with the Greenery to just maximize your production. And actually our final tech talk, which is in September, is going to deep dive on the software. So we won't go too deep into it today, but I just wanted to touch on one feature that I think is super relevant to everything that you've been talking about today, Lexi, and that is the crop scheduling feature. If you want to just give a super brief overview of what it is and how it works and how it's helpful.
No problem. So this is something that every farmer is going to be using every day they're in the farm. This is going to be such an awesome tool. It's so visually pleasing to work with. So I'm really, really excited to be able to use this feature. Essentially what this is all farmers have to use a crop schedule to make sure that they are seeding the right amount so that they can harvest the right amount for whatever consumers that they are providing to. So this feature is going to basically tell you exactly how much you need to seed. It's going to keep you on track. It's going to tell you when you need to harvest. It's going to tell you how much you need to do of everything. So it's very easy to input the information about your seeding behavior into that sort of left-hand side. Those are mimicking your seed trays within your seedling table. And so it lets you know, organizationally speaking, what's where and when things need to come out. And then once you get a notification that it's time to transplant or time to harvest, you can move those cards over into what is outlined as sort of your cultivation area, which again helps you sort of understand organizationally where everything is. And that will also let you know when it's time to harvest and sort of help keep track of all of the data that you are actively kind of collecting as you're farming. So it's beautiful, it's helpful, it's very organizationally pleasing. So I can't wait to use that.
Yeah, I think this is a tool a lot of people have been waiting for because currently there's a lot of notebooks and spreadsheets going on to track all this. So very exciting that there's this beautiful visual way of doing it now. So we've spent the past, let's say 25 minutes talking a lot about the what and the how of the farm. And I just really briefly want to touch a little bit on the why. In the sense of what do you think are the greatest implications for being able to unlock space in this way with vertical farming, and why is it important for people?
Definitely. So, I mean, we here at Freight Farms, we want to be able to grow the most amount of food possible to feed the most amount of people possible with the least amount of inputs and resources and space and land. And that's definitely, at a loss at this point in time. So with the Greenery S only taking up 320 square feet, we're able to grow the equivalent of 2.5 acres of farmland and actually produce 2 to 6 tons of food annually. So this is a really, really kind of incredible metric, and especially considering that a lot of our farmers who have multiple greeneries or multiple farms actually will stack them on top of each other. So if you imagine sort of double this output for sort of the same square footage, I think that's absolutely phenomenal as it relates to food deserts and food justice and all of that.
Fantastic. And just to add, and kind of going back to my point at the very beginning about our company mission of this idea of growing food anywhere, believe us, the irony of the fact that we take a shipping container, which traditionally transports perishable goods around the world and brings them places like way past their prime, and we totally flip that model in their head and are able to move the food production. I mean, I think that's so amazing, and it's all part of that form factor. It's the vertical farming. It's the ability to put a farm anywhere and have it work independent of the amount of space that there is, or soil, or environment, or anything like that. And for me, at least, that's really the power of this vertical farming technology. And before we move into our Q&A, just wanted to quickly shout out a few of our customers. Both of these customers, Eden Farms and Urban Leaf Farms, are located on islands that are very small. The Bahamas were located here in Massachusetts in the USA. So I like to reference that the Bahamas are half the size of our state, and Cyprus is even smaller. And at least Eden Farms that I saw, they have to import 90% of their food just because they can't grow enough to supply their population. And both of these farmers, in spite of, the Bahamas, super tropical, humid, Cyprus is the exact opposite, very dry and arid, but they're able to use the tech to really amplify the space that they do have and grow food year round and really bring people a product that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get. And it's just so amazing to see the technology actually in action. And just want to quickly plug, we are doing a live webinar with Eden Farms on July 14th, and you should be getting emails about that. So definitely recommend you join an amazing customer story. So I do know that it's coming up on 5 o'clock, but I'd love to do maybe like 5-10 minutes of Q&A. Lexi, if you're okay with that. Yeah, hopefully people can stay, but if not, thank you so much for joining. And the recording will have all the Q&A answers, so check them out if you can't stay for the live ones. So a lot of the questions that we got are really talking about the different crop types. I think you really piqued people's interest there. So let's start with, how many different types of crops can you grow at a time? And a follow-up question is it better to grow a large variety of crops or to focus on one type of crop?
Those are both awesome questions. I don't know if I actually have an answer to how many can you grow, because we are still, as our research and development department, understanding sort of what things can and can't grow in this space. So stay tuned for more information on sort of our full spectrum of everything that is compatible on the farm. I do like to kind of break it down into kind of 4 categories of what is most commonly grown. So those are going to be your lettuces, your leafy greens. So that could be kale, collards, chard, mizuna, arugula could fit in there as well. You can do herbs, which is one of my favorites. So pretty much every herb is really happy in this space. Like we said, sort of cilantro, parsley, dill, oregano, thyme, basil for sure. As you can see in this image, basil is always happy in the farm. And then our last category is usually going to be root vegetables. So things like radishes, turnips, carrots, beets. But I will say there's also sort of an experimental category. So some people like to grow flowers. Some people like to experiment with growing berries or other types of fruiting plants. All of those are possible, but they just require a little bit more input. So they're sometimes more difficult to grow on like a total scale. But we do encourage farmers to experiment. That's kind of the fun of this technology for sure. So lots of different growing options. We have a lot of resources on specific ones that we have specific questions about things, and we're always happy to see what people are interested in having us try out, because it's all about providing this to you guys. So that's sort of the first half of that question. And then second half, is it better to grow a lot of things simultaneously or just sort of one thing-ish at a time? It really depends on what your business model is. A lot of folks grow sort of CSA produce or things for farmers market where they like to have a mixture of things. Certainly some plants have different growing ranges where they're comfortable at different temperatures and different humidities. So it's important to keep that in mind as you're selecting what you want to grow. But I will say that a lot of people will ask, is basil compatible growing with lettuces? Because if folks are familiar, basil likes kind of a more warmer climate, basil likes a colder climate. You can grow them together, but if you really, really want to maximize basil, you could get a whole farm and just grow basil and really fine tune exactly the environment it wants to really make it as happy and productive as possible.
Yeah, great answer. And we've definitely seen farmers do both. Some people just get 3 farms and they just grow lettuce, and that's what their market is. And some people, you ask them what they're growing and it's like the list just goes on, and you're like, you fit all that in one farm, and it's an awesome range. But definitely if you're in that kind of like business planning phase and you're listening to this, reach out to us. We do have a really handy tool that helps you kind of see like what kind of mix you can grow in the farm, and with the yields, kind of how much revenue you can drive, and play around with that. And it's a fun tool to use. Another question that I think is a great one is about there being limits to the size of the plants that you can grow based on the size of the rows.
Yeah, so there will be a size limit, but for the crops that you would be growing in this space, that is well within the range of what it would sort of normally be height-wise growing to anyway. I don't know if we can grow corn in our farm, so I don't know if we've ever tried it, but I imagine because of the height of corn, that might be kind of tricky. Yeah. But as you can see in this photo, we have some basil in here and we have some chard in here. Both of those can mature at sort of a larger size, kind of closer to 2 feet. And as you can see with our farm operator in the middle of this photo, that there's still space between her and the lights as well in here. So, you want to kind of keep your larger plants to 1 or 2 rows, like we were talking about with our arrangement, because if you do have them in all rows, it will make them a little bit too close to the lights most likely, but you will have space for those if you keep them sort of all concentrated and plant some smaller things on the other parts to make sure it's all equivalent sort of lighting for each.
Yeah. And what you said about corn, it is interesting as kind of hydroponics, indoor farming, vertical farming becomes more mainstream. I think there's a lot of interest for people to kind of evolve and develop varieties of crops that are more mini. I know, we did some research with tomatoes that were like more mini and clustered. So hopefully, if it's not possible now, soon there will be like a mini corn variety. Although maybe we grow enough corn, maybe we should stick to lettuce. But hey, it's up to you what you want to grow. So just a quick follow up on that, as we were talking about rows. Would the rows harm the plants on the other side if there's a larger crop taking up more space? Or I'll even add, like when you're moving things around, like the way in this photo, like the row is kind of pushed up on the plants. No.
Not really. I mean, depending on the fragility of that plant, you don't really want to like bump them into them too much. The only damage that I would say would be kind of possible to the plants is if you kind of if she were to run out of the farm for something else and the lights were to turn on and they were actually making contact with the plant leaves, that would be definitely the time where they would pose some harm to those plants. But we were experimenting with growing calendula flowers in our farm about a year ago, and they were in every single row. If you're familiar with calendula, which is a type of marigold, that turns into a big, massive, beautiful bush. So with all 4 rows of our farm being that, I felt very comfortable by the end of that, moving the rows into those plants, and they were extremely resilient. They actually pushed the rows back. They pushed the lights back on me, and they were like, "We're okay, we're fine over here." So they can kind of stand with themselves in a remarkable way.
Oh, that's awesome. So heading back over towards the nursery station, this is a really common question we get, which is about possibility for microgreens in the seedling troughs. What are your thoughts on microgreens?
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. That's a very common question because I can concur with that. That is such a common question we get. That is on our research and development schedule to finalize sort of what the ideal means of growing microgreens is, because as of right now, we definitely know that it would be possible to plant, whatever type of microgreen we wanted into one of our 288 cell trays, allow those greens to grow for sort of 2 to 3 weeks, which is probably about the age that you would want to harvest them as microgreens. And you could be able to do that. However, that's probably not the most effective way because microgreens traditionally are grown on these sort of reusable hydrophilic mats that basically kind of act as a sponge. You kind of sprinkle the seeds and they all grow from there. That's definitely a much more low input, high output means of doing it, although we haven't necessarily found the exact trays that make that possible for our table just yet. So stay tuned on that if that's something you're interested in. We definitely have extra space in our seedling table, specifically kind of to accommodate something like that. So I am personally can say very much looking forward to doing that research and nailing that down. But in the meantime, if you wanted to do it that other way, just sort of extra seedling style, that would be definitely possible. Other folks also build their own sort of rack in the farm and just sort of do it on the side as well. So that works too.
Yeah, I was just about to say that it's pretty common. You can't really tell from the photos, I guess, in this presentation, but there is, even with the seedling table in the front there's still a good amount of space. I mean, we've had someone put in like an armchair into their farm. So you can, you can appreciate that there is kind of space on the opposite, on the right-hand wall when you come in. And we do have folks, they will put in extra storage, or some people put in like a microgreen rack, just that's like dedicated production for that. So if you're really interested in microgreens, that's a really good kind of hybrid solution. Quick question about transplanting, which is basically, how do you transplant if you can just like super quickly take someone through the actual manual process?
Absolutely. So the plant piece is not something that we dove too deep into in this tech talk, but I'll definitely walk through that super quick. So when you are seeding, the thing that you are seeding into in your seedling trays are going to be what's called a plug. So that's going to be either like a cocoa coir or like a peat moss, very kind of rigid, spongy kind of plug. It's got a little hole in it for the seeds, but also it's very sturdy. So that's what the roots will grow out of. And it makes it super easy when you're transplanting to actually just pick that up as one whole self-contained plant, remove that from the tray, and then place that directly into the panel. It's very important when you're putting them in the panel to be aware of sort of the angle and the depth, and sort of various means of how you plant them to make sure that they're getting the water that they need. So we can go into that in sort of a different, another tech talk space, but essentially it's a self-contained sort of plant that's able to be kind of picked up and then plugged out and then plugged back into another space.
Yeah, and I believe in your farm tours, you kind of show that process in the farm, so it's a lot easier to explain kind of the process of pulling it out and putting it in. And then for whoever asked that, that's when we were talking about the plant spacing guides. That's really where those come in, because you can exactly line up the plugs, and it really speeds up the process, which is awesome. All right. I'm going to say that's our last question, just because we're coming up on 10 minutes past 5. And I don't want to keep people longer. I'm sure people are trying to head home or start dinner or whatever. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for everyone who joined. Thank you so much, Lexi. This was so enriching and wonderful and fun. And I invite everyone to join us for our next Tech Talk. And that's going to be all about hydroponics and nutrients. And I think a great follow-up to this one, just talking about how we help plants not only maximize their output, but through maximizing space, but also through giving them like the best nutrients. So yeah, and we'll have a recording for you shortly.
Thank you, guys.